accidents, through the unlikely connections, setting up the conditions of possibility that allows us to co-organize the energy, the emotion, the information, so we need to move now to another space where names, containers, it doesn't matter as much. That which holds something in place, it matters less now. And a lot of things had to happen to get us to this point where there's enough understanding and there's enough context to just go forward and make this more real, ground it. So many people come, there are many reasons, there are many causalities. We'll go into that as a philosophy. Yesterday we unraveled as much of the medical and the scientific as was possible. That was recorded. We're not going to cover so much of the science. It doesn't make sense here. We might go into some of the meeting points between the spiritual and the scientific. But I think what matters now is to go to the core of things, to go to the heart. And the point, like what is the point? Everything is the point. You are the point. Every day is the point. Every room is the point. And how do we get it to the point where we don't ever lose the point? Everything is valuable. Everything is essential. Everything is just so precious. And to be able to hold that in a way that's like equal to what the energy holds. For me, Belgium was a dream. We were dreaming it in 2018. It was at the peak of inner dance, right before I said I need to stop doing something that I was doing for maybe already 10 years. 10 years of this. Every single day of those 10 years was just indescribable. And I knew there was something more, so I had to stop. And in the middle of my stopping, I was in this deep retreat. I was in conversation with the inner dance community in Belgium. And I felt that, like, I need to go there. There's something there. It seems to be the place that I need to be in, because there's an energy there. I was laying down here like just a moment ago, and I opened my eyes and I just saw this cross, and I was looking right at the middle of the intersections of the grid, the matrix, and like just it all just makes so much sense. So I want to maybe ask Caroline to join me here. She birthed inner dance in Belgium in 2017. She was interesting for me. Like when she went to Palawan for a training, she got sick, and everyone was there taking notes, and everyone's focused, and she was in bed. I was thinking, oh wow, how is she going to do this? She wasn't there at all. She wasn't in the space, and she went back to Brussels, and we would just email, and something was transmitting, something that was already inside what you might call a body, but what is embodied which is historical, cultural, and when you do look at that from a Belgian experience, culture doesn't look like culture. It looks like an interculture. It looks like a cross between the East and the West, the North and the South. I trusted her. She's half African. And the roots of inner dance, there are two roots. When I first came into real contact with the energy, when it descended and when it awoke, the first words spoken as the codes came through, number one was the mother and I are now one. The second was it began in Africa. And then time stopped, and then time reversed. And we're still experiencing the retrocausality that was back then. So coming to a space like this where inner dance actually holds a history, we're in a self-defining like moment and space, time and space. And there's something about the stories that goes beyond the stories. The stories are important. And then there's something about the meta story. Like, what is the story of all the stories? And how is every single small story actually linked to the big story? And how do you hold both, the person and the planet? Because when you do come into that remembrance, you need to embody that somehow. So I'm so happy to actually have her coincidentally coming back here at the very time we're here. It brings the old and the new together, because we can trust this more and more now, so much more context, that we can speak all the languages where this could be safe. Hospitals, schools, governments, companies, people saving the earth. This is not just something we're doing now. It's another dimension. So welcome. If you could maybe, this is okay, it's pretty sensitive. If you could maybe contain what it was like to actually bring it here, yet it brought itself here, and somehow we were just watching it. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah, I really had the feeling that I was not doing a lot. And looking back today, I'm kind of realizing that actually a lot happened at that time, but it was not my experience. Things it just happened. I started, I remember, with a very small group. I think we were like 2 or 3 at the very beginning, and then it grew quite quickly without advertising. Actually, people were just joining. And then it became like a big movement, I would say. And so I think I was facilitating sessions almost every week. And then at the end of 1 year, we had a training, an IDS training, that was also very, very intense and powerful. And I think it was a big transformation for all of us, and for me as well. And I can imagine that it's also part of the fact that I went back to Rwanda as well. That something happened there as well. And it's really as if we were, I would say, in another space. That's how it felt, like in another dimension. It was very, very special. Even today, looking back, it's like, something that happened in another dimension, that it's still like kind of a dream or something that's still, hard to explain. But there was something very fluid that yeah, it really just happened. Yeah.
What was it in the Belgium energy that we found so central in the inner dance as a philosophy, as a practice, and as a set of theories?
One thing that, when I was also reflecting again, was that it was really a mixture of different cultures. It was in Brussels, but I think most of us were not like really from Belgium. There were a lot of mixture. There was Katerina from Greece, yeah, from all over Europe, from Africa as well. So it was very, yeah, like I would say like a kind of intersection or meeting of different cultures.
Like
and also
a world union, not just a European, but like a global union.
Yeah, yeah, and also, yeah, French and Dutch as well. And yeah, we talked about it with Tom in the car because we drove here together, that Brussels is like it's not really, well, it's Belgium, but it's different from the French part and the Dutch part. It's really like a, yeah, there is something.
Sitting here, what I realize is, because you're a psychologist, and your orientation is about the mind, the roots of illness, and it's about belief structures and the psychoanalytic. And then I think one of the reasons why I trusted the inner dance movement in Belgium was it was so populated by mental health experts, that it wasn't the patients who were laying in the mat. They were the actual practitioners, the therapists, the psychotherapists, psychologists, maybe doctors. And I remember the feedback was, there's something that's not working within the therapy that inner dance seems to provide. What do you think that was?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good question. We had an amazing conversation yesterday. I mean, you're half African, and not just Africa. If we know anything about Rwanda, and we talk about trauma, memory, that's a whole different level. I think Africa, for me, it's not a continent, it's not a culture, it's not a skin color. It has something to do with the body. Africa is a memory of the body. Body is a memory. Body is history. So what does it actually mean that it began in Africa? What does it mean to remember Africa? From a Belgian space, there's a decolonization process that has to be worked out there, where we need to go back before we go forward. So a lot of us know that Western philosophy holds a dualism. There's a mind-body dualism. It's a Cartesian mind-body problem. That when you think of religion, mind, that's a separate domain. And when you think about medicine, the biological, that's what you study. You specialize in that. So I think one of the big realizations was, and people are seeing it all over the world now, we must go back to the body with a different conceptualization of what is this. This is not so much just what we defined it as. And so we need to redraw the whole project, the whole construct. What do you think?
What was the first question?
Well, okay, you could even relate it to Rwanda, where there's so much pain. And a lot of people are, Tom included yesterday, like, there's a deep question here. Do we keep repeating the story? And at what point does the story actually find a new, like, page? a white canvas. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say related to Randa, there is indeed there is something that like consciousness needs to go back into the body because of all the trauma and the pain related to the genocide, but also the colonialism as well. So there has been a lot of violence. But there is still, I would say, what I'm feeling there, that there is still a lot of fear in going back to the body as well. It's it needs to go slowly. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Philosopher Aristotle, there were 4 causes. And what are they? People would ask, let's say about inner dance or the energy, when they come to me, like, where is it coming from? Pi. Is it coming from you? Is it coming from the mother? So that would be the efficient cause. When we want to get to know about a concept or an object, it's hard to actually have an understanding without an efficient causality. So it would be good to hold a container in your mind that, yes, that is important. Where is this coming from? Not just for you. When you share this to others, you will need to understand the part of a person that's always looking for the efficient cause. What would be the other ones? There would be the formal cause. What is the formal cause? The question might be, how was it designed? How was it structured? And then the material cause would be, what is it made of? Right? What's the material made of? What's the raw ingredients? And then the last would be the final cause. What is it for? What does this actually do? So you almost need to build categorizations in your brain so that these 4 questions, these 4 causalities are different rooms sharing the same house. You did not come here just for inner dance. Inner dance is not the room, inner dance is the door. So when people do literalize it, it's about inner dance. Even I don't use the words inner dance anymore as much as I don't need to. When I talk to doctors, I don't use inner dance. When I talk to schools, I don't need to. All I have to do is go to the essence of what are we doing, what is it for, what is it made of, and where is it coming from. And that could be applicable to a school curriculum, a medical protocol, like a way of governing, like a society. So I think we go beyond, okay, it's coming from me, or it's coming from a master, a guru, it's coming from a transmitter engine. It's coming from everywhere. Especially at the point where everywhere is everything and everyone. Somehow linked together as the same thing. So I think as a ritual beyond this weekend, I don't care anymore what people call it. I love anything that could encase something. And I think we should do that in a church. If we're going to do that, we should do that in a church. Thank you, Sophie. We thought it was deconsecrated. It's not. It's a church. Right? I don't know what you guys were thinking when you came here. But wow. Let's do it here. In Belgium. In a church. Already that says so much. You can walk out the door now already. Okay, I get it. I get it. Why a church? I'm looking at these images, I'm looking at these symbols, especially that guy. I personally have a history where I became that guy. I became those symbols. There is a dimensionality where you become God and you become a goddess. And I had no doubt that I was him carrying her. I was able to bring this forth because I knew that I am them. And I could only hold that coming from a very humble culture, knowing that everyone was that and everything was that. And the work was simply a mirror so that everyone could remember safely, slowly, and then we could ground that in a way that doesn't need to always be in a temple, ashram, or a church. There has to be a transition point to getting it there. So we can't escape certain histories on why religion, why spirituality. Okay, one of the projects now, even within a Belgian experience, because for me, why Belgium? It has something to do with what are the most important concepts that could converge all the knowledge domains. For me, if there were certain important concepts that would hold a lot, one of them would be translation. Translation theory is the new critical thinking. It used to be Marxism, communism, community, socialism, and then it was post-coloniality. And now we're beyond that. We're not angry anymore. We can speak to each other. We've gotten beyond the emotion. So translation is the key. And we're not just talking about translation between Greek to Chinese, French, Dutch, translation between dimensions, translation between domains. This is not a church, this is a university. Like all the departments, all the, like how do they collide? How do they come together? Like all the details. Very intricate. Like a mandala. All the parts, somehow, they all actually fit together, and you somehow need to go into a place inside, and somehow, sometimes you see that everything is connected. Nothing is separate, everything is one. Inner dance began there with that awareness. I've been in this work for 17 years. Inner dance has been traveling across the planet for 17 years. And what is amazing is that we have notes. We actually have notes in what is happening in the body of the Chinese, the Singaporean, the Malaysian, the African, the Indian, the Polish, the English, the French, the Dutch. We actually have these notes. Some of you might be experiencing this from a local energy space, but this is actually a global project. We're navigating the mind of Gaia, the mother, and there's a tapestry, the great grandmother's thread interwoven, and somehow you could go there. You could go to a place where everything is connected. That could be a feeling. And when I talk about the global notes, it's not just a feeling, the actual structure, we can see it. Some of you who have been studying with us, some of you who have access to the open source that we've sent out. We're not selling the energy. We're giving it away. It's all online. Our YouTube channel alone has about 70 videos. The only problem is each video is 3 hours long. Do the math in minutes. Sometimes each minute actually packs quite a bit. It's out there. You remember the Lucy movie with the USB stick? It's already there. It's downloaded. But who's going to read that? Who's going to process that data? So what you're looking for is a system of interpretation, a way in which you can take what's been accumulated. We don't need to add more pictures, and people are uploading a lot of pictures. We don't need to make so many other sounds, because every sound possible has already been made. It's already been organized, reorganized, disorganized again and again and again. What we need to do now is to integrate the information. There's no need to add more. What we need to do now is to bring it together, and we can do that as a community, but it needs to start inside your body. So there are these questions we will keep repeating this weekend. How the heaven are you taking an infinity and putting that in a body? How are you doing that? Like, you were born, do you remember where you came from? When you die, do you know where you're going? These are conceptual questions, but they're actually quite useful when you are holding space. Holding these really simple sounding questions, but do people really ask that? Do you remember where you came from? I came from the main street there, or I came from the house, I took a shower. Do you remember where you came from? Every time you go to bed, when you're coming from REM state, do you remember where you came from? Every time you're in between lives, do you remember where you came from? And we're making more space for that so that we're remembering where we came from. We came from a history of consciousness. And when you think about religion, the concept of God was organizational. When you think of causality, God was a good one. I would say God was a good one. When you were born, or for those who have children, you're probably really conscious of this. There's one question they ask again and again. Dad, Mom, why? Why does that happen? Why? Why does that do that? Why? Even if you don't ask, you actually need a way to be initiated into the third dimension, what you call a story through why. And what is the answer to why? Why? The answer is, there's only one answer to why. Pourquoi? Because. Okay? Do you see how you're indoctrinated into time? It's so simple. Something had to come before that thing happened. Causality. Something had to have been here before me for me to be here as part of a story. So there was never a beginning. You were born into the middle. Isn't that traumatizing? So, oh my God, like, give me a starting point. But there's so much going on since the beginning. So you had to fit your way into a whole bunch of histories. So that's where it starts. You're just being, yet there has to be causality, because it is boring, however exciting for everything to happen all at the same time. Can you imagine, okay, read this book in 1 second. Can you enjoy that? No, I need one day at a time. I need a word at a time. I need one person at a time. Even people who want to know their past lives. No, one life at a time. It's already confusing to be you. One at a time. That's time. But we're tired of that. So somehow inner dance is bringing more space into causality. Causality is deterministic, materialistic, and reductive. And this is what we need to heal. So think of God. We were coming from the myth. There's so many reasons for the why, okay? From the Greeks, the Egyptians, the god of thunder. Okay, that explains the thunder. And the god of the rivers, the god of the trees, the god of love, the goddess of wisdom. They probably caused it. So blame Zeus, blame Athena. So do you see what religion did? Every time someone had a question, they said, okay, there's one answer. God. Why does the sun come up? God. Why was the earth created? God. Why is this happening to me? This terrible thing? God. Trust one thing, God. That was organizational. That was actually a beautiful way we could bring everything together. So we came to a point where we could only speak to the source through what's called mediation. For those who are battling with these terms like transmission, it's about that. It's about what's called the placeholder. What is a placeholder? What is something that holds something in place that actually never had a place? Your name is a placeholder, so when I speak your name, like what's your name?
Mel.
What does Mel mean? Can we talk about it in 5 minutes or 5 hours or 5 years and get to the bottom of Mel? Mel is a placeholder, but when we say Mel, you know Mel, and those who know Mel, it holds you in place. God is a placeholder, and that holds something in place. But what does it mean to go beyond the placeholder? So when you think about religion that came from the mythological, and now we're in the rational, which is a different system of placeholding. Before language, there was no placeholding. In fact, language was something we invented so that we could hold in place what we call internal representations that in the past were all externalized. To the tribal man or to the young child, everything is always here and in the now. And when we created placeholding, and the single most influential placeholding event was reading and writing. When we learn to write, we learn to document the information so that even when someone dies and is gone, the information is still there. In oral tradition, when we were just using the spoken word, when you record the information, a lot of it was rhythmic, lyrical, it had to be musical. We had to keep repeating the poems, the epics, so that we wouldn't forget history. So what we learned to do was to extend spirit from inside to the outside, so that we can hold more information, more memory. So we can create Brussels in New York City, Kigali, Manila, Singapore. We could hold complexity outside. Until this point when we would start to go inside. So a lot of the experiences that are happening in the world actually belongs to this dynamic that I am speaking now. That when you mention God as a placeholder, prior to that, for many people, the first placeholder wasn't that. It's this one. It's the Father. So how you define God is how you define the Father. Either as an ideal or something actual, someone who's super strict, super omniscient, or someone kind, someone from inside, someone from outside. And then the goddess would be the mother. These are placeholders in your body until such time that you learn to project these placeholders to everyone else that you know and everything else that you're doing. These are the primary image schemas, if I was to use the scientific term, conceptual metaphors. And they're not just in your mind. If we are going to heal mind-body dualism, we have to go into the body and understand how are you holding these mechanisms. And when you start holding the space with people, that is going to show up. What is your paradigm? What is your belief structure? What is your geometry? How are you organizing your information? Is it tight? Is it strict? Is it expanded? Is it kind? All these conversations are one. Family systems, religion, power structures, economics. It's actually one conversation. And something transcends all these dimensions. Something slips through all these dimensions, making them all one conversation. Do you now understand what inner dance is through that? It's called space. Space transcending time. That's what this is. Allowing you to speak the unspoken, hear the unheard, that is being spoken by all the beings, even those you have not met, all coming into the same. So in embodied cognition, or in the sciences, in linguistics, in language, there is something called metaphor. Metaphor. What is metaphor? No, I'm not talking about Facebook or Instagram, but what is metaphor? We can still use God for now, but everything is a metaphor for God. It could be money. Money is a great place-holding technology. Before money, we had to go into so many argumentations as to what is that worth in relationship to this one. Money created a placeholder so that you can value, you can transact, you can negotiate what something is. It's not actually just about money, it's about how do you negotiate what is valuable in exchange between this and that. All these are really important to converge alongside the energy process, because the energy process is transactional. You are still trading. What is the most important? Not just to me, but to everyone, and how do I honor all of that? That's why, you can see now, okay, that's why we're in a church. There's something about mediation. We were, for so long, either in Europe, in Asia, different parts of the world where we needed the mediators. I can only speak to the energy through my guru, or the bishop, the priest, the pope. I can only access the information through my teacher, through my shaman, my rabbi. We needed the mediators back then. And there was something about the transition from Catholicism to Protestantism. When Luther said, oh wait, no, you can talk to him directly. Do you realize how shocked people were in Europe? That no, I can only touch the holy book, and I am not even allowed to interpret that. So when people were given that power, to speak to the source, the brain, the mind, and the body, as an organizational entity, had not developed a system, a critical thinking system, an appreciative thinking system, a science, a psychology, a medicine to actually speak directly. That's called hermeneutics. That's called the circle between the sender and the receiver, the message and the channel. So in this energy, we're hoping to go back to that history. A lot of that was 400, 500 years ago. How do you read the Bible? How do you read the Quran? What is the correct way? Because we were ascribing God to be in the book, or the person assigned to be closer to God, and we're still dealing with, like, how do I hold a way of interpreting the information? We started this movement when we were in conversation with Belgium in our dance, and we named it Studios Mundos. Studios isn't about studying, it was actually a place in Turkey where interpretation between orality and literacy was happening in the monastic tradition, in the manuscript culture, where people were converting sound into image through the written word from the spoken word. And I felt Studios Mundos went into full circle in Belgium within this. It makes sense when I speak it. It's like, yeah, global union. Okay, here, okay, let's do it. Having said that, I am a believer in the awakening of the West. I think something is happening, has been happening, and will happen here. And I think a lot of that will have to do when it borrows something from the other side, going beyond the Egyptology that took place in the Napoleonic era when people started having access to Egypt and the Orient. Orientalism began where the West suddenly had a counterpart called the East, the mysterious East. Do you recognize the rarity of a brown man holding this global space? And I'm not speaking as me, I'm speaking for all that I represent. The feminine, that which hadn't found a voice, the brown, the black. And when it finds its voice, and when people discover it, it's not linear. And when it starts to speak, people are does that actually mean anything? Does that communicate anything? That's the voice. And people are amazed upon seeing that voice. Oh, okay. That holds a lot more than the words. So what would you do when something comes from the south and the east and speaks to you as part of a decolonization process? I used to think that this was going to decolonize the colonized. Many years ago, I realized, no, it's going to decolonize the colonizer. Now we're equal. Now we can actually speak as equals. We're now the same. Now you know the language of energy, and now we know the language of science. We can work together. We can collaborate. We've been working on that. How do we create an equal space? An equal space that is generous, that is abundant. So I find it important to speak this now, because what you're looking for is the core, a middle space upon which any information you later hold, whether it be a new neurology, a psychology, a linguistics and anthropology. All of these, the study of the mind, the study of language, the study of the brain, the study of music, the study of thought, the study of culture, the study of the species, the study of the universe, a new pedagogy or a new schooling system for the young people who will not be initiated into fragmentation. Every single part needs to be interwoven with the whole. That is true embodiment of consciousness, where the mind and the body are not separate anymore. But you need to start somewhere, so you have been a student of unity or union. You are interested in finding a way. Because most of the time when people do look at inner dance or kundalini, what it looks like is, wow, that's really messy. That's really disorganized. That's a lot of chaos. When I first brought this up 17 years ago, and people did not know where it was coming from. There was no context for this. There was no experience of this. Like, I would touch people and they would just go and they would... People are like, what are you doing? Because when you're looking at it from the outside and it's not been seen, it's like, what are you doing there? That looks like, ew, yuck. I couldn't explain it yet. I had not yet gone into a dimension where this was explainable. But what I wanted to tell them was, wait, in the chaos is a lot of organization. There's actually a lot of structure. But then people come to me, okay, give me the structure. But what they're looking for is, what are you making up? For me, I never actually share anything that's my structure. I'm only interested in the structure of consciousness itself, our structure. And this has been why people have trusted this so far, because I never really share anything that's not shared, that's not epistemologically correspondent. When I speak truth, it's because it's true for everyone else, not just because I say it's my truth. It's my narrative. I know better than you. My energy is better than yours. I have more life force than you. My kundalini is a lot shinier and better. But having said that, I'm not canceling that out. Kundalini was on its way as the one concept historically that would bear ontology. Ontology is the philosophy of being. And when you want to know something, there has to be a conceptual domain that explains the thing. So it was bound to happen that someone would come up and say, no, Kundalini can explain that, because it simplifies it. So I am glad that there is a concept historically. I tried that out in the beginning. It didn't work for me in the long term, because it had so many connotations. But something like Kundalini was a placeholder. It was a good placeholder. Until some people, parents, teachers, do Google and see, okay, there's this thing with the tongue coming out and with the many arms. It was good. It existed a long time ago. It was appropriate for that time. We can culturally appropriate or borrow that. So many Westerners are now using that word without actually having come from that culture. That's okay, because it bears ontology. But there is an expiration date to using that term, for sure. Because this is not that time, and this is not that space. So when we do come into new terms of reference, we would need to construct that together. I think only then we can trust it. I can't do it. I can't just write the book, the new Bible, the new Quran. That's been done. We saw where that went. When you try to encapsulate that, that holds a lot of power. That's good as a business model. This is a business model. But that's not going to save the earth. That's not going to work on the complex problems that require a really deep philosophy, a really deep understanding of what is the true nature of time and space. You know, I am a student of history, but I'm not interested in the history that's literal history and the history of man, the history of Earth. I think the kind of history that this energy actually gives us, it's the history of history itself. And that would need to be held by the history of consciousness. But then that kind of history is not called a history. It's called a herstory. Because why does it need to be his? So there's something going through adjustments. People have taken the inner dance and masculinized it, gave it an epistemology that's still masculine, is coming from this guy, these men who were touching other people, and then that got passed on. So let's go past that word for now. We can go back to that word, the K word, later. Epistemology is the philosophy of knowledge, and if people are interested in knowledge, in knowing, not just being, you need an epistemology. So for something to be true, the truth conditions would be, number one, and this isn't just me, however way you're going to come away from this weekend and the rest of your life, I would like you to be a philosopher. It would be amazing, right? Okay, I'm a healer, I'm a teacher, I hold space. I'm a philosopher. Who doesn't want to be that? No, it's okay. Just sitting on a rock, contemplating the meaning of the universe. Who wants that? But that's what this energy will bring you, because it will give you time. Even as it speeds something up, it's slowing something down. And you are beginning to go deeper into what does it mean? What is the point? So truth conditions. If you're going to say something, that's a knowledge claim. And if you're going to say that's true, be able to back it. You need to substantiate what you're saying. So what you're saying needs to be well put together. It needs to be coherent. So that when you share it, you're not insecure. You're not just coming with an agenda or a cognitive bias. You're actually interested in the truth. And you're open to criticism. You're not like shaming people. You're not like trying to separate it. No, I said this is true. And then as soon as you say it, shut the channel. Okay, don't talk to me. They run away. I said that was true and I hold the power. Number two, it needs to be correspondent. So when you say it's true, it needs to be shared that is that also true for you? And number three, is it pragmatic? Does it work? Can you ground that? Super high thing, there. Can you do that as a parent with the children? Can you bring that to a hospital? Could you, are you creating an alternative? Are you creating an activism? Are you separating yourself as someone who knows more than others? Or are you like Neo in the movie The Matrix, who kept trying to fight Agent Smith and could not? And then he died. And then the only way he could counteract with the Matrix was to jump inside the system. Do you want to keep fighting? Or do you know a way to jump inside the system and speak to the system from inside without fighting in a way that's safe. So one of the causalities we're here is to bring more context to very vulnerable work, very sacred work, a lot of which is now splattered across social media, which is all well and good. It brings more ontology to something mysterious. But there's so many layers to this. It's not easy to hold. And when you work on the image way, way, way too much, something that happens is we literalize it. We just see the materiality that's moving, but we're not going into the structure. So a lot of the work that we do globally is to address the problems. There are innate problems in the awakening process, especially something. So we're working out the problems of addiction, of ego inflation, of power dynamics. The other one would be the mind goes blank. And then one of the questions is, if you did this long enough, what would actually happen to you? If you kept doing the basic frameworks of this, what would happen to you? Memory loss, the non-myelination of synaptic connections so that you're not actually able to hold information very well. And then impatience, wanting things fast, just like many young people now who are accessing technology. We need to bring in a lot of the notes or the insights so that we can balance this more. I'm glad there's so much excitement around the world for this, and that some people are paying so much money for some of this. Huge money, you know, if you think about it from a per day rate and what doctors are paying for a lot of information on a per day basis, it's a lot more. Like, what are we? So I'm glad it's getting exciting, it's spreading, but the problems aren't being spoken, and they're not yet being addressed. So some of you might be coming with questions regarding the visibility of some of the problems that we see outside and inside. And this matters to those who have already been spending time with this, or those who have questions: what happens if you keep doing this for 5 years or 10 years or 20 years? What is it going to do to your brain? So there are schisms, forks in the road, where you would either have to choose one or the other. Last weekend we were in Paris, and one of the things I shared was when I was a baby, because the energy makes you a baby, it would make you an inner child. And a baby is not stupid. A baby has many more connections than you have in your brain. Although parents might not agree when they're changing diapers and they're listening to the noises. But babies potentially hold a lot more connections. Potentially, not actually. For some who are in the energy, the question is about growth. Because there is such a thing as waking up, awakening, becoming the baby, becoming the cosmic baby. Like, oh, okay, it's so much bigger than I thought. But when you are there, you have to grow up at one point. So for those who might be new to this, what we will try to work on this weekend is to go through the awakening and the growing. It's going to be 2 steps. For those who have been in the awakening, you can just work in that one project. I want to grow up now. I'm a universe. I'm an earth. I'm ready to grow now like the sun. Go ahead. The schizophrenic, like the schismatic, the schism. When I was a baby and I grew up, I actually grew through Western philosophy and Western science. And these Westerners are growing down through Asian energy. We're becoming each other. The past of Europe is the future of Asia. The past of Asia is the future of Europe. It has to be this way. Come into our energy phases, it will help you to come into space, and we come into your time and land into historicity. And then let's talk. So I was glad to be in Paris last weekend because I actually grew through French philosophy. I think the notes are there. And because Belgium holds a huge piece of that, I think we should revisit them. We should go back to Descartes, all the way to Derrida, through Foucault, through Roland Barthes, because they were holding inner dances, structuralisms and post-structuralisms. And so when we do hold Belgian space, we are going to access very deep philosophy. Whether we speak about it or not, the French part of Belgium could balance out with the other parts of Belgium, not just the Flemish, the German, the African. So one of the most prominent French philosophers, the pragmatic ones, was Michel Foucault. And he gave us this concept of power knowledge, that those who hold more knowledge hold more power. I think we're coming into a post-Foucauldian era where I would talk to Michel and say, that's not right. Because what I'm seeing in the energy is the more power you hold, the less knowledge you can actually hold. And I'm seeing that in brains. The more you try to access power, the mind will shut down and will go into what's called aphasia, will go into the baby mind. Later, that could become ego if it doesn't go through the developmental stages that were initially given to us by the French psychiatrist Jean Piaget. So I think if we were going to think of the mind, and if we're going to hold a psychology, if we want to go to a starting point, something we can agree on is it needs to be developmental. It needs to somehow remember, how did I get here from a 2-year-old to a 3-year-old discovering language and creating memory structures, and why do I not remember my memories when I was 1? And how come some people in the process are remembering their time even in the womb, even about the earth? When you become interested in how to balance the energy, to hold a more balanced energy, what you will need to think about is, am I allowed to hold power? Because power isn't something we negate. Power could be energy, power could be love. So what is the kind of power that balances things? So what you've been interested in is a brain state that can hold both. So when I talked about the schism, it's power or brilliance, power or genius, shamanic Einstein, or you want to hold both. And for that to happen, you need to hold time and space together. So there are many schools now. There are places in the world, like in Spain, we call them the variants, so many energy practices, and somehow when people look at it, they say it looks the same, but there's a lot of names. There are a lot of different techniques, and there are many diverse variations of the energy. A lot of them I feel are important. I've seen all of them. You know, by the time I was retiring from frontline work in 2017, I've held 20,000 bodies of all color and shapes and sizes. I've seen them go into magic, mystery, weird, strange, alien intelligence. So I've seen all these styles, and what I see is that there's these brandings of these styles, like this is the style, okay, something to do with the light language thing, and the pointing that part of the body thing, and the antenna. We call it the antenna. When we see it, we just needed to understand it. So there's been, when you watch the old videos, what you realize is there was diversity in the movements. But then when you watch when certain things happen, now there's a monoculture of the energy where everyone's kind of copying each other, that it's supposed to look like a certain thing. And one of the most common mistakes in trainings that I hear is when people say when you're not moving, you're blocked. That's a problem with the imaging. Because right now, the current realization is when the body isn't moving, that's actually when things are really going deep. So that brings us back to the project called dimensionality. Why are we doing this? What is it for? We're entering into another dimension. It doesn't have to be around riding a spaceship, the aliens come, they take you there. You can do it here. You can do it safe. You do it all the time. It's just that you're asleep when you're doing it. And we're bringing it here, so you can bring it to work. You can bring it home while you're taking care of the kids or doing the laundry. Okay, so when you see all these instruments, say, okay, oh my God, right? That's a lot of stuff. And each of them has a lot of potentials. It doesn't matter what you use. It doesn't matter what your tool or device. Yeah, I think I do need this for now. Let's see if that comes up. Oh. Let's try to wait. Yeah, okay. Sure.
Hi.
Yeah.
Could I ask you something? I was very interested when you talked about hermeneutics in relation to the challenge of, like, everybody can read the Bible.
Yeah.
And it seems like we're in a time of a kind of hermeneutic crisis.
Yeah.
because now everyone can be an author online,
Yeah.
and there seems to be a real problem of
Yeah.
how to navigate truth.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering how that fits with this
Yes.
relationship between energy
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the hermeneutic context for it.
Okay. So hermeneutics is the science and theory of interpretation. Historically, it began with religion, and then we applied that to literature, to art, to the sciences. It spoke about a time when we needed to develop the mind and the brain to hold the parts and the whole together. So think of when you read a book. When you read a book, you have to read one word at a time. And the more you read the words, the more you get a sense of the whole, the gist, the story. And when you get the whole, you get more and more awareness of how each part interlinks. We had to do that in order to evolve. And hermeneutics, like in any culture, when we become interested in our own structure, that's an evolutionary leap. And when people aren't interested in that, we're just literalizing, like this is true, it's real. So we need to go into a dimension of meta in order to understand what's called a system. And centuries ago, when hermeneutics was beginning, there wasn't even that much information accessible. Books were expensive and rare. And right now, there's so much information across so much media. So a lot of young people are actually in a depression because for them nothing is true. Because there's a multitude of truths and a multitude of truth-sayers, and they don't know who to believe in. And when they don't know who to believe in, all the less will they believe in themselves. They're not able to validate the outside, and they cannot validate what is inside. That's why this work holds so much power, because it gives a starting point. It's like, I am okay, I am worthy, I am the source of my own power and energy. But because of technology and travel, cheap airline flights, people are exposed to each other now. We didn't actually understand the other continents and the other cultures. So now there's collisions. And a new hermeneutics is coming up. You cannot achieve a real integration, though, if you don't have the brain to do it. You can't keep the old body. You cannot retain the old nervous system. All of which really just organizes your information. The synaptic connections, neural connections. You need to change your body if you want to change your mind. And every single concept you learn actually transforms you. Even as you listen to these words that I share, somehow you feel that, okay, that's helping me organize. Because he's taking his time, one word at a time, to actually paint le grand image, the big picture. And we didn't do that in schools. We didn't do that in church. We didn't do that in family systems. We didn't do that with governments. All of these were really good at managing parts, but we weren't given a meta narrative, a story of all stories, so that a lot of the small stories would fit in. So something happening in the cognitive sciences is a lot of these histories are now coming together. The history of the brain, the history of language, of the mind, spirit, of information processing systems. To understand the mind, you need an understanding of the brain. But you also need to understand something about language. You also need to understand something about information processing models. Scientists are ahead, but are they experiencing it? Something happening in the inner dance is you're actually going into the origins of language. You're going into the origins of the mind and of the brain. So that's what it means to go back to Africa. To go back to the history of, okay, we were communicating without internal representations. We couldn't achieve virtual abstract thinking yet. We're in the concrete, the sensorial, and we can recreate the imaginary world, the symbolic world, coming from how we're experiencing electricity and magnetism, from the roots, from the source. And from that, based on what we do know now as a species, even just maybe a small percentage of brain capacity from the 10% that maybe humans are using now. If you're accessing 12%, you access 15%. Maybe in a couple of years you're at 20% and you don't look the same. You don't sound the same. You're not moving the same. That means exponentially you're holding a lot more. So from, I think, embodied cognition, hermeneutics in the past was mental. It was in literature, and then it was applied to interpreting law, ethics. But now, I think an embodied hermeneutics is at work. That would allow the mind-body problem to be the mind-body solution, if you will. Does that satisfy?
Sort of quite explosive. Thank you.
Thank you. Mikhail.
You were speaking about when you speak the truth, and it's related to what Peter said.
Speak louder, so everyone can hear.
So before you say when you speak the truth, it's a bit related to what Peter is now was asking. You had it now make it a story of all stories where they all fit in. And then you mentioned before, like 1, 2, 3. I remember something. One was make it the truth for all body and share the wisdom.
Yeah.
Then the third one, I have it also, and make it conceptual. Don't keep fighting. Connect with what exists already. But I missed the second one.
I don't remember. It should come up anyway. Thank you. The contexts that we're holding, it's really quite cross-conceptual. Thank you. I'll keep that where it would weave.
The 4 truth conditions.
The 4 truth conditions. Is that what you were asking?
Yeah.
Coherence, correspondence, and pragmatic.
The correspondence was missing.
Is it grounded?
Shared.
Is it shared, and is it well put together? Okay? One interesting thing about this, and I'm asking this for the long term, when people think about the chakra system, the rainbow body, where truth exists in space and not in time, when you think about philosophies like hermeneutics, epistemology, they actually have colors. The history of thought through Western philosophy would be something like ontology, epistemology, rhetoric, hermeneutics, axiology, phenomenology, and empiricism. The history of thought, the history of science, the branches of the mind in the West exists historically. It evolved through time. And then when you experience the colors, it exists in space. It doesn't change across time. And it's amazing to put that together. So when you begin to study, okay, the system of interpretation, phenomenology, the subjective experience, axiology, ethics, law, pragmatism, the body,
It's all there. Philosophy in the first place is philo and wisdom. Philo and Sophie. Philo is love, Sophie is wisdom. So when we do say you're approaching philosophy, you're a lover of wisdom. And I don't see anything wrong with that. Because it's in the board, let's make this nice. This is what we look like. That one. When people are always like, okay, what do I look like from inside? Am I a dragon? Am I a serpent, a phoenix? No, that's what you look like. You're a grid. You're a matrix. That's your name. You're called space-time. Time-space. Time is that which evolves one at a time. Space is that which is happening all at once. So how does this help, this structuralism? Giving the example of this, all these sounds, all these possible information, I'm doing it and you're doing it. Whenever you say a word, whenever you move your body, you're making choices. And that choice is always here, like in the middle. You're taking all the space, all over the space, all those dots, all the space, and you're filtering it. That's what your mind looks like. Like all the possibilities here, it looks like an hourglass, and then it becomes like one point called the here, now. Now, here, and when you do put that together, that spells nowhere. But this funnel is what we're opening, so when people are going to become more space, this is sequential, right? Point per point, one at a time. One at a time. This is yesterday, this is last week, last year, 10 years ago, and you're constantly jumping, and constantly making choices all across the space so that you're trying to hold as much as possible what represents the whole, as much as you can. That's hermeneutics. Or more exactly called the hermeneutic circle. The past and the future, here and there, you and me, nothing and everything, into just one thing. That's today, not tomorrow, not yesterday. Here in this church, not in the forest out there, not in the shopping mall, here in the church. That's how you're modeled. That's how the mind and body is modeled. And so now there are these energy beings that don't look like that. In the past, there were these other words that were described that wasn't just energy beings. You can call that schizophrenic, psychotic. All these people who were not living today, they were living all the days in one day. Autistic, shamanic, but now we call it energy. But that's all it is. It's like, okay, it's not just about today. I'm feeling the traits, the via negativa, not just the thing that I'm looking at, but the very thing that I'm looking at is actually hiding everything I'm not looking at that makes that one thing possible. It's the negative space, the black space that allows the thing, the concept, the idea, that's formerly called crazy. But right now, it's called sensitivity. It's called hyper-reality, multi-dimensionality. So one of the best ways to understand that is language. In Belgium, a lot of you speak more than one language. Some of you speak two. A lot of you who are not from Belgium, some of you speak 2 or 3 or 4. So I'd like to know, how many words do you know? When's the last time you did a word count? Do you know 500? 300? Do you know 1,000,000? In what language? How many words do you know? So when you express your heart, your passion, your soul, what I'm constantly wondering about, the philosopher, researcher part of me, is when you choose a word, whenever you're speaking, how are you doing that? Out of all the words you know, isn't that boggling? Like right now, even as I say the first word, the sentence was finished even before I started. How am I doing that? I need to be doing that outside of time. The whole message was complete. Even before or as soon as we intended to gather here together, the thing was done. We did a training in Finland. Some of you probably thought about going there. That was nice. The constant insight was we were finished before we even started. Something about the mind already lived that moment before, but we need this formality so we could experience, enjoy, and make more choices. So what we are serving to others is the ability to go more into space, not in this sequential thinking, causal thinking. Like, if I do that, that's going to happen. If I eat that, that's going to take place. So something very particular that's taking place in the inner dance is a movement. Normally time moves forward. If you do go into space, something that's going to happen is time's going to go backwards. And instead of causality, what you would go into is retro causality. To go forward, you need to go back now. To head into alien territory, you need to go back to the ancients. You need to go back into the archaic. You need to borrow from the mythical. Some of these symbols will come up again, that which is embodied in your person and in the culture. So when I choose to work with a lot of sounds, and a lot of you will learn to hold more and more sounds, when you do get stuck, if you're using music, and when you get stuck with the same sounds, the energy will get stuck. Because one of the reasons why we are holding the energy is to bring diversity back to what became limited. Neurodiversity, linguistic diversity, biodiversity. The ecosystem in the human got lost because in causality meeting modernity, with the tribal culture, nature used to cause man. And right now, man's causing nature. So to reorient yourself back into the ecosystem, we need the retrocausality. And that's energetic. That's an energetic law. When electricity starts to go higher than magnetism, time goes backwards. This is not just a spiritual explanation. This is pure physics. There are parts of the universe where the effects precede the cause. The answers come before the questions. Tomorrow comes before yesterday. And inner dance is that place where it's already happened, what has not yet happened. And you trust it. That's why you're here. Because when it's given to you, you know that this is mine already. It's not coming from somewhere else. So I bring up language as a metaphor to help us understand that you're doing something about time and space. Let's go back to a cleaner grid structure. You're constantly making choices. Every word you commit to is a contract. Especially when you're able to hold the energy in that. Still sequencing, one at a time. But every word is God or Goddess. Every day is a universe. Every person that I meet is cosmic. When you do become energy, there is that experience where nothing is separate. If you've been there. And so a brain developmental process could be to train yourself to be able to hold more of the infinite. And one way we're doing that is to hold more sounds. Okay? So we're not just using music. When I think about sounds, I'm thinking about history still, what began in Africa. What I'm thinking about is how many movements and how many experiences since the beginning of our species did we have to gesture? How many experimentations before we learned how to coordinate both hands contralaterally? I mean, when you were a baby, it was hard. You had to grow. Anthropologists often wonder, how many times did you use your arm so that you could learn to throw like a stick accurately, or do that with a bow and arrow? That took a lot of neurological wiring in the old brain system, the subcortical regions, developing the neocortex, the new brain. So now you have these superheroes, you know? I'm kind of old school, so I normally mention like Michael Jordan, Andre Agassi. I stopped watching sports a long time ago. But like Tiger Woods, okay, you take a stick and you have a ball, and then somewhere far away there's a hole. And then everyone's watching you, it's a really big deal, and then they take the stick and they hit the ball, and then they try to get it to the hole in as least possible amounts of, to make it efficient and optimal. Consider the long history that it took to get to this point where someone could do that. That's historical. So, within post-structuralist French thought, one of the things that I do like about deconstruction is this. Whenever Jacques Derrida writes a book and it's so boring, he's always saying thank you to all that came before him. All the conditions of possibility that made that moment possible. So let that be prayer. Let that be honoring that I am here because of everyone who was not me, but holds aspects of me that makes me able to be here. Especially with this momentous moment in time when so much information suddenly gathers only in the last 30 years. This exponential growth into singularity where we're all becoming each other. Like what was it like before cell phones, before the internet? It's right now when the shift, the transition between time and space would take place. What did you do to deserve to be alive right now? When the histories would collide. And then suddenly an energy comes to you and boom. It just becomes one. Everything had to collaborate. Like, how are you doing that? How are you creating that? You need to have so much trust that even the people that I don't like, they all had to come into teamwork. My enemies, my friends, my allies, the villains, they actually all had to secretly plan together so you could be here. So you would have to say thank you to all of them, all your people, all of your moments, all of your rooms. They all perfectly had to align from the hydrogen atom, from the beginning of the universe. Was it accidental? Was it just by chance? Are you just lucky that the sperm cell met the egg cell to make that you? So choice, the middle point, the choice thing needs to be holding a lot more than just what's here. When the Mexican stranger told me in Los Angeles in a mountain that this was going to happen, this was way back in 2001 when I was still a burnt out yuppie trying to understand my depression and my suicidal thoughts. He told me about the great-grandmother, and he named her. Her name's Kali. I don't literalize it, so I don't need to go into Hindu tradition to look at the image. Kali is also Kala. Kala is black time. Kala is the negative to the positive. Kala is space. And when you do have more access to space, that space is knowledge. So this is what we're going to be working on. Do a time check. What time is lunch?
12.
Mm-hmm. 30 minutes. Okay. Wait. Where is the one who was sitting here? Her name's Yella.
Yellow.
Okay. That's okay. It's okay. No. All right. One of the things I'm thinking about this weekend is to study vibration. To study the waveforms. What do they mean? Like some of them are, and we'll make some of that visible. But let's look at that through a body right now. Maybe Ahilan, you could choose a body. And then we could borrow that body and just put that body there.
Wow.
Any
Any.
body.
Can I choose the body? Yeah.
Yeah, that body. Could we borrow a mat somewhere that's not being used, if there's any?
You want use?
Maybe she doesn't need it,
Yeah.
but maybe you should just be the one to help hold. It's good. It's okay. It's okay. Yeah,
That's also something I know.
yeah. But you would be the one to. Okay. Ahilan is born in Sri Lanka and he's German. He's a good one to hold this. So close your eye. And then feel the space, especially what is above and below. We're looking at a body. What is that is a body? But what is that body? And when you learn to speak to that body, and that body is acknowledged and seen. Feel your heartbeat. Look around your space. Everyone in your space. And everyone in the space has its own space. Look around. What is below is above. Look around. Choose just one. And then go inside that one. Enter the one in. Look around. And out of everything you see, be led to just one. Go in. Choose one. Faster. Go in. Choose one. Go in. One. Keep choosing. Keep going in. Go. In, out, in. And when you find somewhere in between all the spaces, we ask, how are we doing? How is the one, the many? How is the inside, the outside? How is the big, the small? How is the same, different? what do we look like as we are, as we were, as we will be. Still point, yet ever dynamic. How does the collective see itself through just one? Something about the body. What is the body? Not as a being, but in coming. And if the body was not just a thing, but is a process, then God is not just a being. Goddess is a process.
I can start with saying that I was traveling in between, how can I describe it? Colors, but I also saw lights, frequencies, somewhere, difficult to put in words, green, yellow lights, like stripes, stars. I was flying in between. I saw a door, like a wooden door. I was with one leg in a dark spot with those frequencies and the other leg wanting to entering that door. I felt very light. It's very difficult to immediately put it in understandable words, but traveling is the most current word I can use. Traveling, moving, constant change and movement.
Amazing. Thank you. Stay there. Dimensions. And it's interesting, right? No matter what you're doing, no matter where you're at, it's there. We could go there through a process, like a ritual, a ceremony, a session, a journey, but she could be in the little shop or the supermarket, and it's there. That's the point. Even if we're not there, it's there. And what are the conditions of laying down, speaking, listening, touching, moving, positioning, sounding, wording that brings someone there? All the conditions. All the conditions matter related to sound, light, all the senses come together, like a concert, like a symphony. And we weren't experiencing it because the conditions were not there. Because it was not time. And now, more and more, it's about time. It's about time. It's about time. Now is the time. So I think this morning is a good enough place holding for that which is not going to be a place, but a space that we will all enter into this beautiful church in Belgium. Thank you, and we'll see you at